everyone, and welcome to our lesson today on typography and specifically typography and Design Mate. So we're going to be in the Sawgrass Design Mate program today for the entire time. But there's some really great things. I hope that even if you are designing somewhere else and then printing with PrintMate, that you can still use. So if you have not met me yet, I am Rhonda. I am the education manager here at Sawgrass, and I've been with the company for 5.5 years. So I started in the care team, really got to work a lot with Design Mate as we were designing it and creating it, and PrintMate as well. So I'm really excited to always show you those tools, and then just some really great things about type. So if you have not tuned into our workshops before, what we've started doing is this first one is kind of a object lesson. We're going to teach you some skills, and then those will be in play throughout the month with Kesley, who's with us today. So you'll see those in her projects. So specifically this month, we're going to focus on some monograms because we're jumping into some topics that really lend themselves, some subjects that lend themselves to that, specifically weddings. So we're going to start with some typography today and then jump into monograms as well. So let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, so I am already in our Design Mate program. This is our inspiration page. We do add new artwork every month at the beginning of the month. So we have some stuff that's coming in next week. We're already starting to see a little bit of that trickle in, and then we will really publicize that next Tuesday. So that's exciting. And then the other thing I get to show you today is we have some new feature enhancements. You're going to see my announcement pop up in the light bulb about that tomorrow. You're going to see some blogs about that tomorrow as well. But you're actually getting a little bit of a sneak peek today because I'm going to show you those as we go through too. So we're going to go ahead and start our new creation. I'm just going to pick a pillow because that's a good size area to use for type as we talk about it. All right, so a few things about how fonts work in Design Mate. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our fonts panel. And I'm going to add in my first word. So with our fonts, we do have our font list. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and do a fill color on this particular word. All right. So we do have our color in there. We'll go ahead and it's done. Now a lot of the time, I'm not going to use an outline, and I wouldn't today. So what I'll often do is I'll just make sure that's at 0, so that outline isn't showing up. And then as far as choosing the font, we have all of our fonts in here. One of the things to point out is we do have some of those Design Mate Plus fonts. So we do have those fonts that do have that diamond icon. If you ever see one of those fonts with the diamond icon, that means you do have to be a Design Mate Plus subscriber to use it. And if you were to add that, you're going to get that error message when you go to print telling you that you have to upgrade to Design Mate Plus to be able to print it. So you will see this is one of those fonts. It's actually a really cool one. It's called Perfume. It got added yesterday. So this is definitely one of those fonts that is that Design Mate Plus content. You're going to see those diamonds throughout. We do have that Design Mate Plus content, but then we have a lot of great free content as well, especially when we talk about our fonts. So the one thing I wanted to show you as we start in on fonts is if you're not sure where to start, or you're not sure what the best font is for what you're looking to do, this filter icon comes in really, really handy. So we have all of the basic styles of fonts. Just to kind of go over them, A serif font is going to be anything that has those feet. So typically it is going to have those, I call them feet, but they're going to be the lines at the tops and the bottoms at the ends, I guess you would say, of any of your letters. So that's what you're going to see with a serif font. Sans serif fonts are going to be without the feet. So if you're looking for just a nice solid font that doesn't have anything extra, that is just solid letters. And when we talk about monograms, there are some monogram styles that lend themselves to the serifs. There are a lot that lend themselves to the sans serifs. So that's kind of the difference between the serif and the sans serif fonts. And then we also have our handwritten fonts as well. And handwritten's a little different than script. Script is generally a little more formal. Often you're going to find those more casual fonts in that handwritten collection. So you're going to see fonts like that in that handwritten section. All right. So if I were going to do my word dream, I've already got it in my color that I want it to be in. It's hard to see on here, but it's kind of a purple. Now, one thing to point out is that as I'm moving these letters, you're seeing that they actually are showing that it is aligned. So we do have the align functionality, actually the align functionality up here, where you can align it top to bottom, left to right, but you're seeing those lines as well. So we're seeing that that is aligning as we kind of go. Now, often we type our words in paragraphs, but in this case, I'm actually going to do them separate so that we can kind of move them around. I am actually going to go for one of those handwritten fonts on this. And then I'll just put this up here. And let's get that color set for me. All right, so I've got my color in place. I've got my word in place. And then I can kind of rearrange that. This is one of those things where maybe a little bit of the letters overlapping each other work well. But it's going to read funny, right? If it's at the top. So if I move my big to the bottom, then that's going to read appropriately. Now, there are times with typography where that's not the case, where just by the size of the word, you're going to know which one you're supposed to be seeing first. So if I did dream all the way and then big really small, should never make sense to make big small. But if I were to do big really small, then you probably would read dream first. So you can play around with that as well. It doesn't mean that the words have to be in the exact order you need. Something like this, your eye is going to be drawn to dream and then to big, so you would read it correctly. But normally what we would do with dream big is I'm just going to put this down here and make this a little bigger. All right. So let's talk about some rules of type and how you put that on your page. I'm actually going to make everything a little bit smaller. I'm going to go with a phrase that I found for graduation season. All right. All right, so I saw this list online. Wish I could take credit for it. I can't. But I saw this list online and I really liked it. And it's the 7 deadly sins of typography. So we're going to get our words set. Make these a little smaller and then we'll jump in and look. Now you're noticing that I am able to lasso everything selected at once. That's really cool. I'm going to show you another option with that in just a little. All right, so I've got everything set up. One thing I wanted to show you, I told you there are 2 new features, technically a few more than that, but 2 that we're going to talk about today. And one of them is that if I wanted to go closer into my area, there used to be a button up here that was a zoom, and you could zoom to the print area and you could zoom to what was selected, but there wasn't a lot of variety there. So they're actually now on the right panel. So anytime you've selected something, you see the right panel, I can click on this and I can enlarge it. And it is a zoom, so it will go up and down, make it as big as you want it to be. This was actually something that was both dealer and customer requested. So just so you know, when you're providing us feedback, and remind me, I'll show you the area to provide feedback. We do listen. We do try to get things in as timely a fashion as we can. So that is one of those features that was very well requested. And we were able to add that. And actually, one of my product ambassadors requested that as well. All right, so to me, other than the fact that this isn't lined up very well, this is actually a pretty good look at how I would say typography should go on something like this. Things that you want to be careful of, what I said about that, what I said about being careful about those 7 deadly sins. One thing that you can do in this program is you can adjust the letter spacing. Now that is putting the same spacing between every letter, but because my words are different, I could actually change that up. So this one, the letters may be not as far apart. This one may be more. And anytime you are doing multiple different spacings like that, it can get a little hard to read. Now, not saying that if you were doing 2 lines, if we wanted to make very fit across proud, you could always do that. But when you have multiple lines like this, one of the things you want to avoid is having different line spacings on each, or on 2 of the same font. Like you may want to do it where your one font is done one way and your other font is done another, and that works. But if every single line is different, that gets to be a little bit hard to read. Now, if these were all typed as a paragraph, I actually can control my line spacing that way. But since I am I'm doing it as separate lines, I can show you the same thing. You don't want to have different line spacings. So again, if I were to take my varies and put them right on top of the words, that works pretty well. That's actually kind of cute. That would work very well. But if I were to do something where this vary was right underneath this, and then this vary was way up here, and then this tired was kind of down further, that's going to look a little bit, well, actually, if I did it like that, that would look very, very odd. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your line spacings very similar. You're wanting to make sure that you're keeping your letter spacing very similar. And then there's that word kerning. Now, we don't do kerning in DesignMate. You do see it in other programs where the E and the R, the distance would be smaller. So the V and the Y are kind of hanging out, and the E and R are really, really close together. That can make it very hard to read as well. So you want to make sure that what you're doing is keeping everything consistent. One of the other things you want to be very careful about is you don't really want to just stretch. So I don't want to grab these anchor points and stretch these letters out. That can make it very awkward too. So you really want to focus on using your sliders more than just kind of grabbing those and doing it. Now, of course, if I wanted to change the size of the whole word, I could always do that by using my adjust the size corner. All right, so another thing that you want to be very careful of is you want to limit the number of fonts that you're going to use. Something like this, 2 is great. 3 would start to get a little weird, especially since it's almost two sets of words is the way I read this particular one. So you want to be very careful that you're not putting too many font styles in there, because once you start doing that, it starts to get a little weird if you've got too many different font styles. So the general rule of thumb, depending on the length of the paragraph or the text that you're doing, is usually 2 to 3 at tops. If you do everything in one font, that can get a little boring. So it is good to vary it up. And even if it's 3 words, do one word a little bit different. Another thing that you need to be careful of is how readable is what you're typing. Let me get rid of this so that I can pull up my right font. So this font on its own doesn't look too bad, but often with either highly decorative fonts or even script fonts, if you were to do it in all capitals, it gets a little on the side of not being able to be read. So you want to make sure that you're not using fonts that are really hard to read. Another one that I saw that to me, it puts it, you have to be careful what you type using a font like Porter. Because some things look good, but others don't. And the other thing that you have to be careful of is every font has a different personality, right? So some fonts are very serious, some fonts are a little silly. So you want to be very careful with what fonts you're using, that you're not getting into a situation where the fonts are extremely different and they clash with each other. It kind of confuses what they mean. I would be very, very confused if I were to get something that had these fonts. It's a little bit too much. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you also want to be careful that all of your fonts aren't too similar, because what ends up happening, I have to take that out. Always make sure that you clear your area. The X's will clear what font type you've chosen. So one thing you have to be very careful of as we look at fonts is if I were to do fonts that are very similar, it almost looks like a mistake, because now it's looking like maybe I clicked off of a font and then went to do it again and did something that was very similar, but slightly different. So you want to be very, very careful with the fonts you choose, that you're choosing fonts that look good together. And also fonts that are different and not too similar, because if we're doing things that look too similar, then it just looks weird. All right. Alrighty. Now let's talk about lining things up in Design Mate. One thing that we can take advantage of is the line on the side. So I could take all of my text, line it up using my dotted line, which is actually kind of my product area or my design area. Let me go ahead and change this font. Now, again, to me, that is a handwritten font, but it's almost too casual to go with the very that I chose. So I'm going to go ahead and change that out. There we go. All right, so again, I'm lining up off of this dotted line since it already belongs to me. Oops. It was telling me my cap lock was on. All right, so now I can do that. Make this a little bigger so it's the same size as Proud, or size as Proud. Go ahead and line that up. And now no matter where I put this on the pillow, it's going to be lined up the way I want it to, because I lined it up and then I just highlighted and moved that over to where I wanted that. All right, so a few other things to kind of show you that you can do with text is, it's kind of boring. Because this is a pillow, the chances of me being able to do this full bleed where I have a background that goes the whole area is going to be slim, because most of these pillows are roughly just under 16 inches wide and tall. So that's really above what I can do with my SG printers. Especially if you have that SG 500, you can still do something that's really, really cool. You're just going to make it as large as your sheet of paper. So you're really going to fill that 8.5 by 11 as much as possible. In this case, what I would do with something like this is I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to add a shape. And so by adding a shape, I can give it a little more something dynamic. So I'm going to go ahead and add this in. I am dying to show you our other new feature, and that is our layers panel. I may play with this again later on, but what you're going to find is that I can click on my circle and it actually highlights the circle. So if you like something is behind something else and you're having trouble getting to it, you can actually click on it and then you can move that up to where you want it. And now it's selected, so I can actually grab my move and move it from there too. So this is one of our new features. Again, this was a dealer request, and I'm pretty sure I heard it from some customers too. So this is one of those things we're going to be talking about a little bit more tomorrow. All right, so I'm going to get out of my layers panel. I'm going to click on my circle and I want to change the color so we can see it a little bit better. All right, so I have put in my color. I'm going to go ahead and take off that stroke because I don't want that. And then now I'm going to send this to the back, and there's my text on top of it. Now I'm going to change my varies to something that's a little bit easier to see. All right. Yep, there you go. So all I did was I added a circle behind it, but that circle just makes it look so cool and so different, which is really, really neat. And now I have my pattern, and then I can take the circle. I can make that smaller. I can make that larger, just to kind of highlight that. It doesn't all have to be in it. It can just kind of be back there as sort of an extra element to make that a little bit stronger and to make that work. One of the other things you can always do anytime you have letters like this is if you go into our graphic element, so elements and then graphic library. It's pulling up slowly. I can go ahead and we have this category called design graphics. And in our design graphics, there's going to be a wide variety of different things that we do have in there. But one of the things that is in there is going to be these color splashes. Now, the color splash that you pick, that is the color it is. These are not things that we're changing the color on. But in this case, if I wanted to kind of add this blue color splash, that one's actually probably a little, I could add a few in here to do that, but there's some that are a little bit bigger. or even these little starburst would be great to add behind my design as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this blue in here. I'm going to stretch him out and make him taller. And then again, I'm just going to send that to the back. And now I have my text on top of it. So that's kind of some designs that we have. Now we do have some, or that's kind of creating your own design. We do already have some designs in there that work really well for typography. If you have not seen this, it's probably one of my favorite things we've ever done, is we've done this collection of Rococo women. I believe that is what it's under. But that works, and then they're under inspiration as well. So if I go to inspiration, you're going to see these where this is one of the best applications of typography. We have a photo and then there's a saying on top of it. So these work really, really great, and you can play around with them. Keep the women, change the saying. We also have other inspirational sayings as well. So we do have our cakes, we have our awards, we do have some typography pieces that come in really, really handy, and you can kind of see how we've done some of that work. Now we're going to jump into monograms next, but before we do, does anyone have any questions for me?
Hey, Rhonda, it's Kesley.
Hey, Kesley, what's up?
So in the kerning on the fonts, does it, in the font list, does it indicate which fonts kern and which fonts don't?
Thank you. So we don't kern. I just included that as kind of a way for everyone to know. But we do have the spacing where it's between all the letters. So it's adding the same amount of spacing between all of them. And then when you have multiple lines typed, you can control the line spacing too.
Okay.
But the
So if you want
kerning
your,
you can't do.
but if you want your letters to be close, then you would just, so it looked like if you were using, say, like a handwritten font and you wanted it to look like it was your handwriting, you would just change your spacing.
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
So like here, which I think it's gonna let me. Yeah, so here on my You Don't Own Me, I actually can increase that spacing between them. However much I want. And if we did You Don't Own Me like this, then I am able to go in and I am able to change the letter space or the spacing between the lines. Or normally I can. For some reason I can't on this font, but normally that would be the case. It could be because it's one of our pre-made designs. All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's start talking about monograms. So this is a lot of fun for me. Brett has had to put up with me for the last couple of days as I learned about monograms. Because to me, I've always like seen monograms. I've even created monograms, but I've never really like thought about monograms. And they become really important if you're creating monograms for people. Like what fonts look best for monograms for women? How about for men? Do you do monograms the same way for, say, a woman or for a man or for even children? So I kind of got into all of that, and it's been really, really fun. So let's talk a little bit about monograms. So I'm just going to start with the basics. So typically, when you are doing a monogram for a woman, and you do this some for a man too, is it's going to be first letter of the first name, first letter of the last name, bigger in the middle, and then first letter of the middle name or maiden name if they wanted as the third letter. So typically when I'm doing a monogram, I'm going to do all my letters separate. So I'm going to start with my middle letter. One of the fonts that, make sure nothing's chosen here. All right, so one of the things with doing a monogram is you can choose a lot of different fonts and a lot of different styles. I really like this particular font. It is called Italiano. I like it because it does give that kind of sophisticated look, but it isn't a true script. So I often have trouble with fonts that are like very scripty because it's my same thing that I said earlier about it becomes hard to read if they're all capitals. It just kind of looks a little strange. So I do like this font. Now, if I were building monograms a lot, I would probably heart my fonts and add them over here to my favorites. So I kind of have my own little font list in case I don't have my little cheat sheet next to me all the time. I could always do that. So I have it. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to duplicate this letter and put it to the left. Now you see again, we're seeing those lines every time we do this, which is nice. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. Now, Brett and I were having this conversation earlier. We don't think there's really a solid rule that all the letters have to line up at the bottom, or they all have to be in the middle. It's really what looks best with the particular font you're using. I like lining them up off the middle because it just makes life easier. But this would be a nice one. I'm going to reduce the size so it matches the other side. If I wanted to make sure they lined up, I just move it over and make sure they're the same height, and then I can slide that back into place. And now I have that nice, simple monogram. Now, all of those things that I just showed you that you can use with typography as far as adding a little more visual depth, I could do that same thing behind it where I did that little watercolor stroke, or I could do a circle or a triangle or whatever that is. I could add that behind it as well. But that's generally kind of a basic monogram. Whether you're doing script letters, whether you're doing elegant letters, this is kind of a general basic monogram. Now, a lot of times with male monograms, what you're doing is you're just putting the letters in order. So first initial of first name, first letter of middle name, and then first letter of last name. And then one font that works really, really good when you're doing kind of that male is more of that kind of school feel. So the font we're going to use today is a font called Graduate. And there's that kind of really masculine looking monogram. And you could put that, whatever you're doing it on, a hat probably for a man, but you could do that with all three letters. Now, something that really was new to me or kind of blew my mind. We'll go ahead and switch our font up. I'm telling you these fonts because I will be perfectly honest. I did not know what fonts in DesignMate would be best to use for this project. So I actually asked Lindsay. If you haven't spoken to Lindsay before, she's the curator who puts all of our content in DesignMate. And so she is a wonderful designer. And so I'm like, Lindsay, what fonts do I use? So she's the one who told me. So if this were for a couple that was getting married, we are going to give them the last name of Carter. You would do the middle as the first letter of their married last name. And then on either side of that is going to be their first initials. So a very traditional monogram, if it was Mary and Fred, we would put an M for Mary here on the left side. And then we would put that F for Fred on the right side. Now, in case you go, but Rhonda, what if they're using a hyphenated last name? Well, then you just have two larger initials in the middle. So we would just take our C and right next to that, put the other last name and then just align everything so that lines up. And we would do it that way. And then I'm gonna need to make everything smaller and make that fit. But I can go ahead and do that, make everything line up and do it with the double last names. Now, I had never heard of that. I researched it and found out that was the way you do it. And I'd never really thought about that. Normally, when I see a married couple, I see either the first letter of the last name or I see the whole family last name. You're going to see what I'm going to do in just a little bit often, but I've never seen it where it's a true initial with their first names and then their last name in the middle. But that's kind of a good thing to remember and a good thing to do too. So other ways that you can do, I guess the only other group that we haven't talked about is kids. Typically with kids, you're either doing, I mean, if you're doing a traditional, you're doing the kind of the one we used for women earlier on, or even the man one. The other thing you often see with kids is you do see the whole name spelled out. Often this is done in more of a childlike font. The one I'm going to use today is actually one that I found that I really like. It's called Maiden Orange, and I really like this font because it kind of has that more like school-like vibe because it is kind of that really intense. It's really that intense serif font, but at the same time, it's kind of really a nice one too. So you can do that for a child. A lot of times we do first initials. I'm going to show you some monograms we already have loaded in the system where it's that first initial, because a lot of people now are saying, don't put the child's name on anything where someone's going to call them by it. So you're going to see a lot of that and the kind of cool things. So the other thing I want to show you is another one that's really good, especially for both kids and for adults too, especially for men. And that's going to be what we're going to call a stacked monogram. So we are going to do the first letter of the first name. I'm going to go ahead and change my font. This is another really great font for monograms. It's Bodoni. So Bodoni works really, really well for monograms. It's just a nice serif font. So I'm going to do the first letter of the first name, and then underneath that, I'm going to do the middle initial. I'm going to hit done so I can change it. And then I am going to do the last initial on the side. So this is kind of a new, I would call it modern, take on doing a monogram where it's the stacked one, where that last initial is big on the side. And then I would get all that lined up, make sure they're the same size. I'm gonna make these two a little bit smaller and do some work there. So of all these different styles of monograms, what's your favorite? What are you liking?
I like this one.
Yeah, I think it's really, really cool, and it's just a little different, but you know, in a world where everyone's kind of got the same look, this is kind of neat and different.
Right.
I think it would work good on luggage.
And just
Luggage.
it being different is nice. We don't do a lot. It must be like a regional thing because in Chicago, you don't get orders for a lot of monogram stuff.
Yeah.
And so when I do, I have to sit and think.
Yeah, well, Kesley and Brett and I all live in the South, and we live and die by our monograms. So
Okay, yeah, Chicago, we don't do that.
yeah, I know, right? I did realize it's probably a Southern thing, but Southerners have their monograms on everything. From baby bibs are very, very popular. Baby bibs, baby blankets, baby towels, up into t-shirts, hats for men, can koozies are really popular with these two. So there's a lot of that you're going to see. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and show that before I delete this.
And see, we just slap your name on it
Yeah, well,
until they get to the age, until children get to the age where they recognize their own name. And for that safety reason, if you call their name and they will come, that's the age you
Yeah.
stop. Because a baby's not going to come to you.
yeah.
They don't know its name.
So I'm going to do something a little with this. So this is another really cool thing you can do. I didn't show it earlier. So we're going to take that circle shape and pull that in. And then I'm actually going to use this as a mask. So I'm going to click use as mask. And then I actually have some patterns saved. And so I'm going to put a pattern in that circle and then take the circle and put that behind. And now there's my letters. Now I would probably play with a different pattern and all of that fun stuff. I'd probably change the letter colors too. But this is just another kind of fun thing you can do with that monogram is either add those circles or those brush strokes that we looked at before, and then using these shapes. Now that has to be something on your computer, whether that be you've kind of scanned in some of those collage papers that you have, or me, I just kind of collect backgrounds when I get a package of art from Creative Fabrico or any of those places. I usually save those backgrounds and use them. All right, so one other thing I wanted to show you with monograms is it's very popular to have the name and then the letter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for myself. Trying to remember what font I wrote down. It's another one of those neat fonts that we have. This one is called Louis George. So it is a very nice font that we have, a nice little thin one. So we can add that for Rhonda. And then I'm going to go ahead and type my name as well. So let's duplicate, make this smaller. This is going to look better if I do it as all caps. All right, so there is that. And then I'm going to put Rhonda over that. Now, there are some programs out there where you can actually cut letters or do those kind of things. We're going to do a little bit of a cheat here in Design Mate. I'm going to go back to my elements. I'm going to go to my shapes. I'm going to add a rectangle, and then I'm going to make that much thinner into a very, very long, thin one. And then I'm going to put that right over my letter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this white. So I know the hex code for white is FF, FF, FF. And then for that outline, I'm not going to have an outline on this one. You'll see why in a second. And so when I take this off, you notice that there is a line or an area where it looks like I've cut my letter. I can take my name, put that on top of it. Again, I'm going to go to my layers panel, take advantage of the fact that I can move that up to put that on top. And now my name is on top. I'll make it a little bit bigger. Now I know you're thinking, Rhonda, that's definitely a different white than the background. One thing to remember is that in Sawgrass printers, we do not have white ink. So anything that is white becomes the color of the background. So in this case, since I'm putting this on a white shirt, it's going to be the same white as the shirt. If I were doing this on an orange shirt, that white area would be orange. So it's going to just be, there's not going to be any color applied. It's a little easier to see this on the PrintMate side. So I'm going to hit print and send this over so you can see it. It's going to take just a second to save and pull up so that we can send that over. All right. We're going to send that over. I will try to remember when I post this video, hopefully tomorrow into the Academy, to go ahead and add these fonts in that I use, just so you can start building that kind of list of great fonts for monograms. One thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the list that we used today, and if you search in the font list by the term monogram, it's going to pop the fonts up that we used today too. So we're going to have that right there for you. It's going to take just a second to populate. And you will see that it is the same color as the paper, and I could print this out and then I'd have a great monogram with my name on it. All right. So the other thing I wanted to show you was we do actually in designs have a section of monograms. You can search by the term monogram to pull those up. It is actually a category as well. So we'll go ahead and pull those up, but we have some really great monograms. Those single letter ones that we were talking about with the animals, that is really, really nice. Let me see. I love these, especially for kids and for kids' rooms. Those are really, really lovely. We also do have backgrounds that you could use with a monogram. So if you were doing a family crest, this would be a really great one that you could add that into the middle. And we have some other patterns and things. These are really beautiful. These florals really make that great monogram that can be used on all those things we talked about earlier. Also a lot of kitchen stuff like tea towels, and also things like glass cutting boards. We do have some over the years that we've done for holidays that are in here. So there's just a lot of great options. Now, when we were looking at our graphic elements earlier, you saw my favorite place to go for things to use as backgrounds for monograms. And that's going to be in those design elements. So in this design graphic category, there are a lot of great things that you can use to either be a frame or just to be behind a monogram to make those look really, really special. There's some really good pieces and parts there to use for that. All right, so that's all I've got. Are there any questions before we go?
This was great. I loved seeing all the different fonts you used and how to combine them. Did you, I might have missed it, but did you show how to use fonts that you have on your own computer?
I did not. Good point there. So if you are that DesignMate Plus member, you can upload your own fonts. So all you're going to do in that situation is you go to your fonts. I'm going to add something new. So I go to my fonts. I'm going to click on my font style and then down at the, let me go ahead and type. I'm going to click on my font style. I'm going to hit upload font. And then any TTF fonts that you have on your computer, you would be able to go in and pull those up. And add those fonts. Hopefully it may find something, it may not. But any of those fonts that you have available, you are able to use. May have. This is where they should be if I have them. Yep. So I'm able to click on that font and add it. And then it changed to that font. So it uploaded successfully. And I'm able to use my own font. Good point there.
Thanks. And then once it's uploaded, does it just stay there or do you have to upload it each time you use
Nope.
it?
It stays there. So when we look at our fonts, there's the collection, which is everything that we've added. There is your own font. So that's everything that you've added. And then there are those favorites. So there's that font list you create by clicking on the hearts. And there's all your fonts.
Oh, and I love to see the layers panel. That looks great.
Yeah, so we are making additional changes to that. You will see there is already some grouping functionality. We're working to get that even better. So in a couple of weeks when I announce it, look surprised. But you are actually able to, let me show you while we're here. I was playing with this one earlier. So if I click on my layers panel, I'm actually able to click on all the pieces. And then they're basically now a group. So I'm able to grab them and we are getting it so you can truly group them. But this at least allows you now to be able to resize and do things with those by clicking right in your layers panel. So that's a lot of fun.
Rhonda,
Uh-huh.
I noticed that little lock has appeared and I played with it and I don't think I'm doing it right because I can lock it, but I can't unlock it.
Well, Lori, that's one of the features that's coming. So
Oh,
give that one a few more days.
oh, okay. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're saying it's not me this time.
It's not you this time, I promise. And did you notice, Lori, that your issue with the graphics library is fixed?
I believe so. I think,
No, it just got fixed today. So now
oh,
it's
okay,
fixed.
then no, then I hadn't gone in, but
Yeah.
I know I unclicked it and I was working in there today too, but so I think it looked all good, but
Yeah.
you know, I always have to try it 3 times to make sure.
Yep. Well, everyone, thank you for joining. Kesley next week is working on garden projects. We're really excited because we've been wanting to do this one for a while. So things like kneelers and stakes for your garden, and I won't give away all her fun stuff. And then the rest of the month, we're going to focus some on weddings because we're moving into wedding season, and that's a great time for monograms. All right. Well, thank you all, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.